My name's Mariane Krogh Madsen. I'm Danish. I am actually, beyond being a visual artist, I am also an art historian. So I fusion a lot of theory in my practice and try to create some research based on both my artistic work, but also in a theoretical reflection and discussion with whatever theory I think fits, and also with methods that I feel is exploring my research, and also how to actually engage with those data that I get out of my work. I work mainly with performance art and interventions, and also it has also always wanted to try to find the right correct way to actually kind of take those data and those materials that I get out of my practice to actually and get them into a bigger perspective, and also into discuss issues that relates to the materials that I'm working with here, which is environmental interactions. And and the project I'm going to talk about here is a research called Body Interfaces that I've been working with. Well, it really started in 2015 to be executed. It has been on the drawing board for a while, came out of continuous work since the end of the 90s with the body, and then I started to work a lot with technology and technological terminology and methodology. And so I started to think like that what I actually was doing early on, working with my body, was actually more or less what I saw was happening in when we start to discuss the idea of the interface. So I started to think like, how can I use my body as an interface, and how can I work with my body as a technology in itself, because it is a machine. I see it as it's also a tool that can be used to gathering data here from the environment. And so the first part of it, of my research, I did in Iceland, at the Flutstunga Artist Residency, which is located in a rural area somewhere outside Reykholt, and it is not accessible if you don't have a car. You need to. There's no bus going there, so we were kind of installed in small cabins, and then had the amazing landscape to work with. And that was kind of my goal, was to go somewhere where I really felt that the nature was present, and everything there was an extremity present in Icelandic nature that I for sure couldn't find in Denmark, and also in Germany not at all. And so it was like I needed to go somewhere where I could really get the data I wanted. So this was perfect. Before I go into those specific data I got from that, I will just first show you her quote, just to go back to this whole idea of the interface. This is a quote by Brandon Hookway, who wrote this book Interface in 2014. And I really like this. Like, he's an architect and he relates to the interface in another way. He's going a lot into this ontology about the word and what it actually means. So you can read here. It's like he distincts this as this is a between phases and a phase in between, which actually means that maybe we should think about it also in a cultural way. That is not just we are way too focused about this human computer, this kind of threshold between a body and technology, and actually go in and even relate this into cultural practices. And this is also what I do in my work. So he was somewhat important for this research project, and it's a great book. So that came as the backdrop. Of course, also a lot of other sources are in relation to the whole idea about using technology is of course also relevant here, but. This is another image from an intervention I did at the Flutstunga. This is a lava field. It's called Halamundran, which is just a big lava field. Has a great texture. It's quite rubbly, sharp stones. And this is. And I started to work very intuitively in this project here. I would say that this it started to be going from an intuitive level to actually where I started to feel, okay, this is an interesting structure, this is an interesting environment, to actually now when I do the interventions, I search out way more the places, because here everything was interesting. So I decided to take all elements. So it was like so whatever was there was ice, there was the lava field, there was some pretty sharp stones. I'm going to show you an image in a moment. It's kind of basalt stones. There was some hay, which was super painful to actually interact with because it's really, really dried, and you thought that would be the easy part. So there was like different elements. So I decided I had to go full circle with this, and what I did was I registered everything. I went out in the field, and then I choose a spot and choose an action to do. And here I was doing it with my face. We can, of course, this is a bit funny, this being between faces and faces between, but actually that was not in my mind when I did that. But I just felt there was an interesting, also an interesting gesture, because also this the way people, like the connotation it is when you put your face down something that looks painful. People are thinking, wow, that must be painful. Actually, it was not so much, but it was a very interesting experience also because there's more senses involved here. You also have the nose, you have the mouth. You cannot avoid to also taste and also to smell. And of course, this whole idea of sensuous experience is important for the research. And also like I reflected a lot in relation to human geography as well, and even also like how geographers are working with landscapes, and also how the idea and concepts of sites are coined and discussed. Because of course, doing site-specific work, of course, always relates to the site where it's done, and also all the politics related to that site. It can be anything, you know. This is, of course, like here you have a rural nature scene. If we do it in our urban space, then other things comes into discussion. I've done that also, but I'm not focusing so much on that now. But it's more or less the same approach. But to go a little bit more into this this whole idea of moving, and the pain actually, and was anchored around. There was one word that I found very usable as this kind of liminal experience, was the threshold condition of the body and the movement, and then all the factors. And also the factors, they also changed actually over time, because I started to have a very kind of instrumental approach to saying, okay, I go here, I move over it, and then I register what happens. And then I started to, of course, focus a lot on the actual bodily movements and then the pains that came. These stones here are very sharp. They are almost like broken ceramics. So moving over them was actually extremely difficult. The wind was very cold, which was something I had the idea about, but was not actually aware of the consequences, even though it looks quite bright. But so there were so many different things. So I started to note all the threshold conditions down, started to analyze them, what they did, and what those parameters actually had of output. And then later on, I also started to think about, but also psychologically, what does that have? And this whole interface experience, what has that given to me also on a mental level? So and that was something that I first started to think about in the field, because I had first planned everything should be very instrumental in terms of data and just kind of gathering data, and not so much about these kind of meta-reflective concepts around the actual experience, because it was very much about interfacing, and so the whole what you can call script that I actually developed, which it actually ended up becoming, because I was of course this is anchored a lot in technology, and I also started to think maybe it would be interesting to actually create some sort of script that actually could kind of explain what actually is. So I for a performance I did at the Electropixel Festival in France, I did an urban one, which was, of course, it was developed on the basis of what I already did in Iceland, and And then I came to the script, and this is a kind of where I'm trying to define what I'm actually doing. So I actually also started to actually there live script everything, which was impossible in Iceland actually, because the wind was so strong the paper would just fly away. So so I started to kind of even the data gathering process became even more codified in that way, because I always had that in my background, in the back of my head, that this was what I was doing, and I'm thinking, why not make it visible? So it started to actually be a sort of live coding, live scripting sessions that I did while performing, and that is becoming kind of a fast ritual into it. And of course, then I have a lot of data, and what do I do with those data? I've done more than one installation reflecting on this. This was maybe the one that it was more like a laboratory. It was done in Aarhus at a project space called Spanien Nidensee. And I actually showed some of my scripts there, but only half of the room was filled with already done data. The rest of it was going to be executed on site. So I was going to then relate to Aarhus and relate a lot to the harbor side. I related a lot to ping-ponging and recontextualized my data from Iceland with Aarhus and vice versa. And I started to kind of incorporate even more like what you call lab kind of sceneries as well. So I started to kind of do sample takings as well. I did collect a few stones and stuff in my first Iceland trip, but now it starts to get even more like systemized into sort of a laboratory setting where I'm actually discussing and analyzing all these things and what effect these have, and then kind of recontextualize them to new sets of data. So I kind of make even these kind of comparative recontextualized. I took stones from Iceland that I then was reactivating in Aarhus, and then with surfaces there, so it all gets sort of mixed together, and also in the terms of science, so to speak. This also like raised the questions in terms of data, like what is valid data, and what can you actually contextualize with, and also again as an artist you can do more or less what you want, right? So it's also to kind of think about the body in that way, but also what's important here, and we also heard others here talk about post-humanism and the thought about the body, and what actually is quite important here, and I'm also quite informed by Catherine Hale, for example, and her idea of the extended body, and also in that way I see this practice of actually engaging the body in this activity of interfacing is also a way of seeing this kind of it's like what Brian Masumi calls it's just like an excessive body. It goes like beyond yourself. It goes out into a political acting body. So in that way, these kind of data can both be used as to kind of analyze specific sites, but it can also be seen in a broader perspective to actually criticize those sites and criticize those structures that are in the site. And that is what I'm quite concerned about right now, is to go in to use this actually as a critical practice as well. And see this kind of an extensive, excessive political body that actually is kind of moving within and questioning the sites they are engaging with, and also the data that is present at the sites. So, and this is just another one from. I'm writing some scripts down, and it's a little bit from the installation. So. Yeah, and this is the last image I have is I did. Well, one thing is that I enjoy actually doing these things also in these kind of open technology environments, because I also see this as an open technology practice. So this was at the Pixel Festival last year where I did this, where I started to work with the terminology, the term of zero level elevation, which is of course also a scientific term, and I was trying to question like how I could level my body and how I could relate to the sea side without actually being there in the seaside. So I was trying to, and then I even went also to use like vertical and leveling and all these kind of different angles I could kind of gather data from. and in that way kind of relate to the seaside of Bergen. So, yeah, I think that was it.